Hey guys, thanks for hanging in there with me last week. It was a challenge for all of us trying to figure out new technologies, and we're still having some folks added to our class roster, so trying everybody to get caught up. I had said that I was posting an assignment last week that I did post and somehow it disappeared, so don't worry about that. I'm trying to work out the kinks with Blackboard right now. So you're not going to have an assignment after this aside from what is already in your syllabus. So just a quick note really quickly, in your syllabus, each class I have the chapter that we're reading in our text, which today we're doing Power and Citizenship in American Politics. And then I have a couple of extra little things under there that we're talking about. So last class it was who gets what and how, and then I wanted you to look over the Declaration of Independence and the Declaration of Sentiments, which I included a link to in the syllabus. Today we're going to do Power and Citizenship in American Politics in your text, and then Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, Federalist number 1, 10, and 51. And you can look those up. They're pretty easy to figure out how to read. All right, so I'm going to dig in on our next section. I'm going to come back with another video on politics of the American founding. We got 2 lectures this week. Some weeks we'll only have 1 lecture. Some weeks we'll have 2. And this is a 2-week lecture. If you're still having problems with YouTube and you're having to watch this at home, let me know. Your schools are working on getting it unblocked so they can watch it at school, but I don't know how quickly that is going to work. So hopefully we'll get all of our kinks worked out and we'll be smooth sailing soon. All right, so politics and economics. How does a government pay for things, or how should private sector resources be used for things? There are political and economic dimensions here. In a capitalist economy, you have an economic system where the market determines production, distribution, and price decisions. Property is privately owned. In a laissez-faire capitalism, this is a let the people do as they wish. This is an economic system where the market makes all decisions and the government plays no role. There are no real-world examples of that. Regulated capitalism is a market system where the government intervenes to protect rights and make procedural guarantees. This is like the United States and Great Britain. The government provides our highways and streetlights and libraries and museums and schools, which is generally undertaken by money from taxpayers. We have procedural guarantees in place. This is the government assurance that the rules are going to work smoothly and treat everyone fairly, but without a promise of a particular outcome. In a socialist economy, like in Cuba or North Korea, this is an economic system where the state determines production, distribution, and price decisions, and property is government owned. Loosely based on the idea of Karl Marx, also sometimes called communism. And they have substantive guarantees where the government assures an outcome, not the procedure. So they're saying you will get this much money, or however it will work. In the United States, like I said, we have procedural guarantees. We promise that the process will be the same, but the outcome is not going to be the same. Social democracy. This is a hybrid system that combines a capitalist economy and a government that supports equality. Sweden, Norway, they're primarily capitalists. They believe that most property can be held privately, and they try to find a balance between substantive guarantees of fair outcomes and procedural guarantees of fair rules. Many Western European countries elect social democrats to office to enact policies that bring about more equality, that eliminate poverty, better housing, adequate health care for all. This is something like Bernie Sanders really is an advocate for. So based on the competing ideas of who should have power and what the social order should be, how much public regulation there should be over individual behavior is really the question that we're looking at. So thinking about the government has the power to impose social order, or individuals exercise personal power over their own behavior. In an authoritarian, I always get tripped up on this word, authoritarian government, these are systems where the state holds all the power over the social order, like China, North Korea, Cuba, Saudi Arabia. The people have no choice but submit to its will. It can take the form of a dictatorship, one individual in power, or a theocracy, power vested in God, fascism, power in the state itself, or an oligarchy, power in the ruling class. And then you have totalitarianism. This is a system where absolute power is exercised over every aspect of life. Of course, you've heard the phrase absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Lord Acton borrowed this idea from several other writers who had previously expressed the same thought, though. Authoritarian capitalism. This is a system in which the state allows people economic freedom but maintains stringent social regulations to limit non-economic behavior. So you guys definitely don't remember this, but in 1994, none of you were born, there was an American teenager in Singapore, and his name was Michael Fay. He was caught vandalizing a car in Singapore, and he was sentenced to being caned. In the United States, that'd be considered cruel and unusual punishment, right? But he had no rights in Singapore and had to submit to the government's will, despite a lot of vocal opposition to the United States, from the United States. That's an example of authoritarian capitalism. They're maintaining stringent social regulations. And anarchy. This is the absence of government and law. This is the most extreme form of non-authoritarianism. It sounds romantic, but honestly, how do you even organize a revolution to get rid of a government if you have no rules? You can't. It doesn't compute, right? So then you have a democracy, right? That's what we have. Government that vests its power in the people. Collective life calls for some restrictions on what individuals can do. We obviously prohibit murder, theft, running a stoplight, things like that, but we try to maximize the freedoms of individuals. We have something in the United States called popular sovereignty, the concept that the citizens are the ultimate source of political power. This is what establishes our Constitution. No government is legitimate unless the governed consent to it. What about types of democracy? The will of the majority, but what is a majority? 50%, 2/3, 3/4? Decisions are harder when you have a lot of people who need to agree. An advanced industrial democracy is a system where a democratic government allows citizens a considerable amount of personal freedom and maintains a free market, though usually still regulated economy. Communist democracy is a utopian system where property is communally owned and all decisions are made democratically. This system never existed. Role of the people. So you have subjects. These are individuals who are obliged to submit to a government's authority against which they have no rights. Or you have citizens, members of a political community with both rights and responsibilities. That's what we have here. American history is full of stories of people fighting to be included as citizens based on income bracket, race, ethnic group, gender, lifestyle. Just because a system is called a democracy is no guarantee that all or even most of its residents possess the status of citizen. Citizens can usually vote in periodic and free elections. They're able to run for office. They're subject to rules such as age of residence, of course. Support candidates, organize political groups, march in meetings, contact officials or press, or now on the internet. Citizens are obligated to obey the law, to pay taxes, to serve in the military, to sit on juries. What about our origins of democracy here in America? Even in Athenian democracy, it was pretty selective. It was ruled by the people, but who were the people? The people excluded women and slaves and youths and resident aliens. And so only about 10% of the population was defined as a citizen, which is eerily similar to early American democracy. It was a small number of white men. The divine right of kings is the principle that earthly rulers receive their authority from God. Ordinary individuals were powerless politically and had no rights of their own. The Enlightenment period, in the 1600s, 1700s, is when science and knowledge started sort of blowing away the shadows of superstition. As rational humans, you can harness the world to do your bidding. The foundation of the government is reason, not faith in reason, and it leads people to consent to being governed because they're better off that way. What about a social contract? This is a notion that society is based on an agreement between government and the governed, which people agree to give up rights in exchange for the protection of others. In Native American nations, they call it the Great Law of Peace. That's their constitution. They suggest federalism, a separation of powers, checks and balances, and consensus building. But American citizenship today, James Madison, a major author of our Constitution, didn't want a system that was too democratic. But because the British monarch had become corrupt beyond redemption, America was thought of as a land where virtue could triumph over greed. The Articles of Confederation remembered rights of citizenships but ignored the responsibilities that came with it. They canceled debts and worked to advantage of poor farmers, and Madison and Locke thought that the government had a duty to protect property. Because of this, Madison ended up rejecting the notions of a pure democracy where citizens would have direct power to control government, but instead wanted to opt for what's called a republic, a government where decisions are made through representatives of the people. It's a pretty smart idea. He thought this would be safer than direct democracy, though, because he thought the representatives would be older and wealthier, wiser, could make cooler and more rational decisions. But honestly, think about it. Would you guys want to have to go run to the polls every time we had to vote on renaming a post office? It's really nice to have somebody elected to do these things for you. Today we have two competing narratives about what citizenship should mean in the United States. Individualistic citizenship, which is a view of citizenship focused on action to realize an individual citizen's interest. As Madison said, too much democracy could be bad. And then collective citizenship, a view of citizenship focused on action to realize the common good. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. How do you engage? This comes about sometimes in times of tragedy, like on 9/11. I talked about last class, hashtag activism, a form of political engagement that occurs by organizing individuals online around a particular issue. It's a great way for ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things, to help determine and to shape political narratives. If I was posting an activity, an assignment for you to do today, this is what it would be. So I want you to think about this. I'm not actually going to post it because I know we're all still having our first week sort of technical issues. So I just want you to think about this, kind of write it down, think about it. It's just something just to be thinking about this semester. Pretend you're forming your own country. You have just discovered America, or whatever country it may be, and you have to make some major decisions in your founding. So what type of government are you going to have? Is it going to be a parliament? Is it going to be a democracy? Are you going to have a monarch? Are you going to have a committee of rulers? What about for economics? You're going to have a capitalist economy, a laissez-faire economy, regulated capitalism, socialism, socialist economy, and social democracy. What about your political system? Are you going to have an authoritarian government? I told you I couldn't say that. Authoritarian government, totalitarianism, authoritarian capitalism, anarchy, democracy. Think about that. Think about the decisions that our founders had to make when they were trying to create a whole new country and a whole new government. Pretend that you're doing it, and how would you do it? Would you do it the same? What would you do differently? You can be creative. Think about some different ways that you could do things. That is your assignment that I'm not actually going to post because I want to make sure everybody gets Blackboard issues worked out before I post things. But think about that and keep up with what's on your syllabus. As always, email me if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.